That night, he only wanted peace and quiet inside a glass cabin deep in the forest. But the knocking at the door, the breath on the window, and the enormous footprints in the snow were just the beginning. These are 3 real-life encounters with werewolves, retold from the survivor's own words. Not a movie, not a campfire story, a chilling reality witnessed under the full moon, where logic ends and legend begins. If you believe monsters exist only in myths, watch till the end and decide for yourself. Subscribe to Tales Mythology for more true horror stories, lost legends, and terrifying encounters from the shadow world. I don't even know where to begin. Maybe with the silence. I've spent my life chasing zeros and ones, code, data, logic, so I'm used to quiet. But this is a different kind of quiet, the kind that scratches at your ears, the kind that waits. I arrived just before dusk. The sprawling forest lay blanketing the mountain, a million branches edging black filigree against the sky. The rental listing called it an architectural marvel. Glass and steel, perched at the edge of nothing but wilderness, 6 miles from any neighbor. I thought, this is perfect. Privacy, isolation, the world reduced to me and my thoughts. The drive-in had been long, a twist of narrow road, the engine whining, maps flickering across my GPS. The realtor had assured me, security, reinforced glass, motion sensors, full satellite connectivity. I believed it. I clung to that belief now like a lifeline. The house's shape, an angular cube of glass walls and steel skeletons, stood stark against the greying sky. Each wall was a panorama of forest, each angle exposing the mountain's curve. It was majestic. I paused for a moment at the threshold, inhaling the pine-sweet air. I dragged in the bags, unlocked reinforced steel doors, and flicked switches. Lights hummed. A voice prompt welcomed me. The fireplace ignited with a hum of gas. The heating system kicked in. I exhaled relief. I was safe. I walked the perimeter, touching the triple-paned glass. I thought of the realtor's promise. You'll see the forest, but nothing sees you. I looked outward, the trees dark and still. I smiled. Back inside, I set up my laptop, poured a glass of whiskey, and connected the security system. Cameras glowed in corners. Motion detectors lined doorways. The world outside became a grid of sensors and blind spots. Within walls of logic and code, I felt invincible. I called my sister, Sarah, and walked her through the layout via video. She teased me. It's like a horror set. You're the rich guy in the ghost movie. I laughed it off. Ghosts are stories. Logic is real. As snow began to dust the ground, I stood before the glass wall in the living room, the heart of the house, watching flakes float down in silence. It was hypnotic. The forest seemed to breathe, but beneath the beauty, something whispered. I shifted, unsettled. I whispered to myself, this is perfect. Nothing can touch me here. I held that lie in my chest like armor. Night settled like a dark blanket. The wind picked up outside. Branches whispered. I have heard a snap, a twig far off. I told myself it was nothing. At first, it was just small things, a flicker of light, a hum in a corner, a shadow crossing the glass. My mind kept returning to the forest's edge. I told myself, rational explanations, dear. Snow drift, reflection. I refused to believe in legends. Before sleep, I took one last look through the living room wall. The forest loomed. I saw a dark shape, motionless. My heart skipped. I leaned in, squinted. Nothing. But for a second, I felt a stare. Then the lights flickered. And from the darkness outside, a deep, low growl, barely audible, but real. My skin crawled. I bolted away. I locked doors, checked cameras, all silent. My heartbeat thundered. The forest outside seemed to pulse. I climbed to bed, the glass ceiling above me exposing the sky. The moon was nearly full. A cloud drifted across it. I closed my eyes with fear hanging at the edge of thought. I woke to a sound I couldn't place, not the hum of the heating system, not the crack of the fire. Something softer, like breath, like the house itself was exhaling. At first, I blamed the mountain air. High altitudes make metal contract. Glass sings quietly when it calls. I told myself it was science. I needed it to be science. But when I stepped barefoot onto the wooden floor, the boards were trembling lightly, rhythmically, as if someone heavy was walking just outside. I checked the motion sensors on my phone. All clear. No alerts. No motion. No reason for my heart to beat like a drum. Then came the smell. A raw, wild scent that didn't belong in the sterilized air of my luxury fortress. Pine, yes, but beneath it, a copper tang, the unmistakable edge of blood. I walked toward the front door, my phone flashlight trembling. The reinforced glass pane beside it was fogged from the inside. When I wiped it clean, I realized the condensation wasn't mine. It was breath. Something had exhaled on the other side. You never realize how loud a heartbeat can sound until it's the only noise left in the world. I backed away from the glass, whispering logic to myself like a prayer. Condensation, humidity, air pressure, nothing else. The words didn't help. Outside, snow drifted lazily, covering the deck, and in that white blanket, I saw them faint depressions, half melted but enormous. Not paw prints, not boots, something in between. I grabbed my laptop, desperate for distraction, for control. If I could immerse myself in code, maybe the fear would fade. I typed random strings just to hear the keyboard, but then the screen flickered. Once, twice, then black. The power died. The hum of the heating system stopped. Silence swallowed the household. I sat there, waiting for the backup generator to kick in. It didn't. Outside, the forest creaked like old bones in the wind. When the first scratch came, I thought I imagined it. A faint scrape, slow and deliberate. It came again, 1 to 3 strokes across the steel front door. I told myself it was a branch scraping the frame. A branch, yes, except branches don't pause between movements like they're listening. Hello, I called out before realizing how ridiculous it sounded. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was worse, heavy, waiting. Then came the smell again, stronger this time. Rotting fur and wet soil, soaked in something metallic. It seeped through the gaps like invisible poison. I stumbled backward, hands searching for anything that could serve as a weapon. The poker by the fireplace glinted in the dark. Fear changes how you think. It strips the polish off your intelligence and leaves behind a primitive core. My logical brain, the one that debugged algorithms for fun, started running survival subroutines instead. Doors locked, windows sealed, phone no signal, exits none. I crouched by the wall, poker trembling in my hands, staring at the front door. The scratching returned, this time lower, closer to the floor, a deliberate pattern, like nails tracing symbols I couldn't see. Then, silence again. And breathing, slow, deep, heavy. On the other side of that thin layer of metal, something moved past the side windows, a blur of shadow cutting through white. I ran to the control panel, praying at least one of the cameras still had battery. One screen flickered to life, static, then focus. The grainy image showed the snow-covered backyard. Nothing at first, then movement. A shape upright, broad-shouldered, walking strangely, half bent, its arms too long. It paused near the wall and lifted its head, sniffing the air, and then it looked straight at the camera. Even through the pixelation, the eyes were unmistakable, twin circles of pale yellow light that seemed to glow through the lens. Predator's eyes. I froze. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was looking for me. The image vanished. The panel blinked off again, plunging me into total dark. Somewhere outside, a low growl rolled through the trees, deep enough that I felt it in my ribs. I wanted to scream, to call someone, anyone, but no signal, no power, no sound, but that unholy rumble. Then a thud, not a crash, not the random noise of a branch falling. A deliberate, testing thud on the glass wall of the living room. I aimed my flashlight toward it. The beam caught the faintest hint of condensation, again a broad handprint, to wide, pressed against the outer glass. The fingers ended not in fingertips, but in pointed arcs that left scratches in the pane. The hand slid slowly downward until it vanished. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed, "Don't breathe. In moments like that, reason becomes a thin thread, and fear saws at it relentlessly. I tried to think, what could mimic a human shape, but not be one? A prank, a projection, maybe hunters in costume. But who would be hunting me here, 6 miles from anyone else, in the middle of a blizzard? I thought of my sister's joke, the horror movie setup, and I laughed under my breath, the sound brittle and manic. If she could see me now, shaking with a poker in hand, she'd say, "Told you so." The laugh broke into a sob. Another sound behind me this time. I spun around. Something brushed the outside of the back window. A slow, scraping circle traced across the glass. I stepped closer, poker raised, breath fogging the inside of the pane. And then 2 eyes blinked open right in front of me. I stumbled backward, fell, hit the floor hard. The eyes stayed there, glowing faintly yellow, unblinking, unhuman. They were too far apart, too large, and too deliberate. The creature, whatever it was, grinned. I swear it did. Its mouth stretched into something that might once have been a smile. Then it vanished, just gone, swallowed by the dark. I ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, locked it. The house moaned around me like a living thing. Somewhere above, a metallic clang echoed through the vents. Then another. Then a sound that turned my blood to ice. Whispers, not voices exactly, but breathy noises that shaped almost words. Low, rhythmic, like two creatures murmuring to each other, communicating. My mind rejected the idea wolves don't whisper, but I could hear it moving through the ventilation system, crawling closer. I shoved a chair under the door handle and grabbed my phone again, opening the camera app, desperate for light. The faint screen glow caught my reflection in the mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize myself, pale, wild-eyed, streaked with sweat and dust. And behind my reflection something moved, a shadow crossing the hallway behind me. I turned just in time to see the living room glass shudder. A thunderous boom followed by a high-pitched wail that wasn't human. The lights outside the motion detectors flared once. Through the flicker, I saw it clearly for the first time. A creature, tall enough that its shoulders nearly reached the top of the window frame. Its outline was wrong human in shape, but bulkier, furred, monstrous. The head was wolfish, snout elongated, ears pricked, steam puffed from its nostrils with each breath. Its claws, the claws dragged slowly across the broken glass, making a sound like chalk on bone. For one surreal moment, it just watched me, studied me, and then it turned and vanished into the storm, as if melting into the white. That was when I learned what true fear is. Not the jump scares of a movie, not the sudden scream. True fear is a slow poison that seeps into your thoughts and convinces you you're safer staying still. Fear makes you complicit in your own doom. I realized that as I stood there, listening to the house creak, the snow fall, the whispering stop. I should have run then into the storm, into anything. But I didn't. I waited. Because logic told me monsters don't exist, and fear told me moving would make the noise come back. So I stayed, gripping my useless poker, staring at the door until dawn began to grey the edges of the windows. That first night, nothing killed me. But something changed, because when the sun finally rose, the tracks in the snow were real, huge, humanoid, leading from the forest straight to my door, and then vanishing without a trace. And for the first time in my life, I realized logic had limits. Morning came grey and weak, like the sky itself had forgotten how to shine. I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, staring at those strange, half-melted tracks. Every print was wrong. Too long, too wide, 5 toes, but the middle one extended far beyond the rest, leaving deep punctures like claws driven into ice. The tracks circled the house once, twice, then stopped by the generator shed. I should have packed and left right then, but fear doesn't make you smart. It makes you stubborn. I told myself I'd prove it was a bear, a deformed one. Maybe. I'd fix the generator, restart the power, and see for myself. So I put on my boots, opened the back door, and stepped outside. The cold hit like a knife. Every sound was magnified, the crunch of snow, my own breathing. When I reached the shed, the padlock was hanging open. The metal had been snapped, not cut. Inside, the generator was torn apart, not dismantled, shredded. Cables hung like entrails, and claw marks raked the steel casing. A fresh print huge sank beside the debris. I backed away, heart hammering, and that's when I heard it again. Not from the woods, this time from the roof. A heavy thump, then another, then the unmistakable sound of claws skittering against metal. Something was climbing the house. I ran back inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt I could find. The house creaked. Above me, something moved, pacing, testing the glass ceiling. I held my breath. A shadow crossed the frosted skylight, broad shoulders, long limbs, and then, without warning, it jumped. The crash thundered through the house. Glass shards rained like ice knives. I screamed and dove behind the couch. The first thing I saw when I looked up was an arm, black-furred, matted, muscled, reaching through the shattered skylight. It landed with the weight of a small car. Glass exploded under its feet. Furniture toppled. The thing straightened slowly, towering, filling the living room. Its fur was coarse and wet, patches of raw skin exposed like burn scars. Its head looping, intelligent, tilted as it sniffed the air. Then it looked at me. The eyes were a sickly amber, gleaming with hunger. It opened its mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't a roar. It was a breathy, rasping laugh. Something inside me broke. I swung the fireplace poker with everything I had. The metal struck its arm and bent. The creature barely flinched. It swatted me across the room. I weighed nothing. My ribs cracked against the wall. Stars filled my vision, but adrenaline or terror forced me to crawl toward the kitchen. I grabbed the only weapon I could think of, a can of hairspray from the counter, and my lighter. When the creature lunged again, its claws tore a line through the wall. I flicked the lighter and pressed the nozzle. A gout of fire burst forth, orange light flooding the room. The flame hit its face and it screamed, not in pain, but in rage. The smell of burnt fur filled the air. It stumbled back, covering its eyes, knocking over a glass table that shattered beneath its weight. That gave me seconds, just seconds. I ran upstairs, slamming the door behind me, barricading it with a dresser. My hands were slick with blood. The wound on my arm wasn't deep, but it burned as if something was eating into the flesh. The skin around it pulsed faintly, red veining out like lightning under the surface. I checked the security feed again. Only one camera still worked, the one pointing toward the driveway. Through the static, I saw two figures now. Not one. The first was the creature I'd burned, pacing, furious. The second was smaller, faster, moving on all fours, sniffing the air like a hound. They were communicating, coordinating. Then the smaller one turned to the camera, and for a second, I could swear it smiled. The feed cut out. Downstairs, I heard the first one snarl. Then something worse, a reply from outside. A low, answering growl, deep and resonant. They were surrounding the house. Every window rattled. I heard scratching, not random, but deliberate, circling. Something massive hit the back door. Then again, until the hinges screamed. I grabbed a knife from my bedside drawer. Pointless, really, but it felt like control. My breathing came in gasps. I could hear their claws on the walls, their feet on the deck, the soft panting as they tested every corner. And then silence. The kind that hurts your ears. I knew what silence meant. They were listening. The next impact came from the kitchen side. Glass shattered, steel twisted. I ran toward the sound, just in time to see one of them crawl through the window frame, half human, half beast, bones cracking audibly as it squeezed inside. Its snout was slick with drool. Its chest heaved with excitement. It saw me and froze, studying, calculating, and then it spoke. Not words, not really. A sound like ruin. Half growled, half mocked. Then it charged. I ducked behind the counter as it lunged, claws slicing through marble. I swung the knife upward, useless. It caught my wrist mid-air and squeezed. The blade clattered away. I screamed, kicked, anything. Somehow my boot connected with the gas stove's knob. The burner clicked, flared to life. Instinct took over. I shoved its head toward the flame. The fur ignited. The monster shrieked, thrashing, knocking over everything in sight. I didn't wait to see if it died. I ran. There was only one place left, the crawl space under the stairs. I pulled the trapdoor open and slid inside, dragging it shut above me. The air was cold and wet. Dust filled my throat. I could hear them upstairs, heavy footsteps, low growls, furniture breaking, then sniffing. They were smelling for me. One passed directly over the trapdoor. Its claws tapped the wood like fingers drumming on a coffin lid. I covered my mouth to muffle the sound of breathing. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. And then silence again. I waited minutes, maybe hours. I don't remember. When I finally dared to move, the smell of smoke hit me. The house was burning. Flames licked through the cracks above. I could hear the crackle, the collapsing beams. The heat grew unbearable. I had to get out, but where? I crawled deeper, searching for the vent I'd noticed on move-in day. Behind it, a narrow passage led to the outer foundation. I kicked the vent open, scraping my hands raw as I squeezed through. Outside, cold air, smoke, snow. I looked back once, through the flames. One of the creatures stood framed in the living room window, unmoving, watching. It didn't chase me. It didn't need to. It just smiled. I ran until my lungs tore. Branches whipped my face. The forest was alive with noise, howls echoing, distant but closing. Somewhere behind me, the house exploded, the propane tank going up in a blossom of orange fire. For a brief, insane moment, the forest lit up like daylight, and in that light, I saw them, 3 figures now, sprinting between trees, impossibly fast. I tripped, rolled, came up bleeding. I could smell my own blood and knew they could too. I stumbled onward, half blind, following the faint glimmer of moonlight on snow. Finally, I saw it, a cabin in the distance, its windows glowing faintly yellow. Hope flared, cruel, fragile hope. I staggered toward it. The door wasn't locked. I burst inside, slamming it behind me, collapsing onto the floor. The cabin was small, warm, and smelled faintly of oil and old wood smoke. On the table, a lantern flickered beside a tin cup. Someone lived here. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I looked around, walls lined with animal pelts, hunting trophies, tools, and then I saw it. Hanging on the far wall, a massive hide, but not animal. The texture was wrong. Too soft, too human, stitched together in patches, tanned, stretched, preserved. My stomach twisted. I stumbled back and knocked something over. A glass jar rolled across the floor. Inside it floated a human hand. I turned toward the door, ready to flee again, and froze. A voice behind me said, "You shouldn't have come here." I froze, halfway between the lantern's circle and the door, the chill of the knob still in my palm. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice repeated low, ruined by smoke or age from the dark at the back of the room. I raised the lantern. The light stuttered over hanging hides, stitching, and a line of rusted hooks that made my stomach pitch. A man stepped forward from behind a sagging curtain of pelts. He was wrapped in a heavy coat, snow steaming from the shoulders, a wool cap pulled so low it nearly hid his eyes. They were pale eyes, tired, watchful. "Please," I said, voice cracking. "Some things, there are things. I know what's out there," he said. "Question is what you brought in here." He didn't point at me. He pointed at the floor behind me. Snow malt, blood, my blood. A trail from threshold to table like a dotted line on a treasure map. Except the treasure was me. "I can leave," I blurted. "Just tell me which way to run." He studied me for a beat too long. Then, "Sit." I didn't. Fight or flight had burned down to the ember of a third reflex. Obey the person who isn't trying to eat you. I sat. He poured liquid from an old kettle into a battered tin cup. It smelled like pine needles and gasoline had a baby. He pushed it across the table. "For the cold," he said, "and for your nerves." I lifted it with shaking hands. The heat made my fingers ache with returning life. "What is this place?" I asked, though I already knew. My eyes kept snagging on seams in those hanging skins. The faint, impossible whirl where a belly button might have been. The suggestion of a faded, curling tattoo. "A stopover," he said. "For people who don't belong." He tilted his chin toward the window. "Like you." Something in his voice tugged at my memory. A gravelly cadence that rattled straight out of a general store and into this nightmare. The name tag floated up in my mind like a dead leaf in dark water. Jebediah. I met you, I said, nausea rising. At the store. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The lantern found the edge of his face. Burned scars, ragged, old, like the aftermath of a life lived too close to fire. Had to warn you, didn't I? He said quietly. Some warnings don't take. A gust hit the side of the cabin. The walls groaned. Somewhere far off, a howl braided itself through the storm, climbed, caught, and broke. I flinched so hard the cup sloshed. You should go to the Rangers, I said. There are 2 of them. They're hunting me. He stared long enough for silence to turn sharp. 2, he echoed, soft. Always 2, until there are more. Behind him, above the table, something caught the lantern light. A carved circle with an eye scratched into its center and 4 claw marks radiating outward. I'd seen it once before, days ago. Scored into an old trail tree with a knife or a nail. I'd thought it was kids. I'd thought it was nothing. What is that? I asked. A promise, he said. Or a debt. Depends which side of the mountain you're on. My arm throbbed. I pulled back my sleeve. The wound had bloomed ugly, the edges darkening left out along. Tiny veins spidered away beneath the skin. Heat radiated off it. His gaze dropped to it. Something sadness, regret, flickered across his face and went out. You put anything on that. Just pressure. It burns. He nodded. Of course it does. Another gust. The lantern gutters. For a heartbeat with to pale faces in a well of moving dark. Jebediah. I tried again. The name tasting wrong in my mouth. What are those things? Wolves. People. Both. He pulled a drawer open. Metal clinked. He set a bone-handled knife on the table. Its edge so honed it seemed to drink the light. He set a needle next to it. A jar of coarse black thread. The feeling in the room shifted from hospitality to operating theater. Careful, I said, half rising. His eyes snapped to mine. It's not for you, he said. Not yet. Not yet. A wet thump shook the roof. We both looked up. Plaster dust drifted in lazy spirals. Then another thump, closer to the door. Claws scritched on wood like nails trying to learn how to write. They can smell your blood, he said. And mine. He moved to a cabinet. The hinges squealed. The smell that hit me was copper and salt and iron and older than both of us. He took out a clay jar, scrubbed with age, and pried the lid loose. Inside lay something like fat rendered to tallow, packed with chalky herbs. He scooped a thumbful and nodded at my arm. This'll slow it. What is it? A promise, he said again. And before I could argue he smeared the paste along the wound. It sizzled. I choked on a shout, bit clean through it, eyes blurring. When the world came back, the burning had dimmed to a steady, hateful throb. The skin around the gashes paled, then pinked. The spidering veins retreated a hair's breadth, as if the paste had drawn something back. What did you just? He replaced the jar. Bought you time. The roof creaked. The wind fell away. And in that absolute quiet, a sound like someone dragging a rake across wet earth rasped along the cabin's outer wall. They found you, he said. They always do. I grabbed for the door. He caught my wrist. His hand was a vice. You run now. You lead em to the next house with light in the window, he said. We finish our business first. He released me and, with a grimace of pain I almost missed, shrug out of his coat. What lay beneath froze the blood the paste had just warmed. His chest was a map of old, wicked scars, too straight to be accidents, too deliberate to be mercy. And across his left shoulder ran fur pale tracks, parallel, deep the mirror of the ones on my arm, only old, long-healed. You can lie to your eyes for a while. Your bones learn quicker. Tell me what you are, I whispered. He lifted the knife and, for one terrible second, I thought he'd pointed at me. He pointed instead at the window, at the depthless dark beyond. That, he said, is what I was. He pressed the knife's tip to the table between us and leaned in. What I am is a man who kept his word. The words hit me like a puzzle piece slamming home, the warning at the store, the symbol on the tree, the tallow that reversed the burn, the wall of hides, the careful way he'd been weighing every syllable since I walked in. A man who kept his word to who? Another scrape at the wall. The lantern's flame flickered, as if something outside had sucked the oxygen from the room with one long, delighted inhale. "Sit tight," Jebediah said, and crossed to the door. He lifted the bar, eased the latch, and cracked it open. "You can't," the words snapped in my mouth when I saw his posture. Not welcoming, not surrender, a ritual learned deep in bone. He spoke out into the blizzard. Not English, not anything I knew. Harsh syllables, guttural and old, rolled from his mouth like stones. He held the knife in a particular angle low against his thigh, blade facing in. The storm answered with nothing. His shoulders sagged. Something like grief, the kind you feel when a person you loved long ago walks past you now as if your furniture passed across his face. "They don't keep the rules anymore," he murmured, to the knife, to the empty night. "They don't even remember 'em." He closed the door, slid the bar back, and turned to me. "I can't give you back your house," he said, "but I can give you a way out." "Down," I guessed, eyeing the floor. He shook his head, crossed to the far wall, and pushed aside a heavy curtain of hides. Behind it, rough-cut timbers and a square of iron bolted into the locks. He heaved. The square swung, a vent cover from some previous century. Beyond it, blackness, and the cold rush of air from a throat of rock. "Old mine vent," he said, "slants into the hill, tight in places, but it runs you downhill, away from the highway, away from this." He gestured at the skins, at the tools, at the symbols carved into wood. "If you're lucky, you see dawn before it sees you." The wind rose again, as if it had heard its cue. The roof boomed. Dust sifted down like ash. I hesitated. "Come with me." He smiled, then small, weary, private. It made him look like the shopkeeper again, for half a heartbeat. "This is my place," he said. "My debt, and my chance to pay it." "What debt?" He looked at the lantern. The flame guttered. His answer was a whisper. Her name was Anna. Before I could ask, the wall behind the curtain buckled. A claw as long as a carving knife punched past the iron vent, gouging a furrow in the timbers. It withdrew, came again higher, feeling for the seam. "Go," Jebediah said, and shoved me toward the hole. I crawled in, cold knife through my coat. The stone scraped my shoulders. Behind me, the lantern snapped off, or was crushed, and darkness folded over everything. I shuffled forward, grabbing at roots, rocks, anything. The tunnel angled down like a throat. From the cabin, the noises sharpened into violence. A howl detonating at point-blank range, an answering roar that shook stone, wood splintering, the shudder of a body hitting a table hitting a wall letting go. Then a gunshot close, deafening, and another. I flinched each time, grinding my knees into stone, fingers numb, lungs burning. Silence. Then another sound I didn't expect. A man's voice, speaking low, level, unwrong. Not Jebediah's, not a hunter's. A wordless command. The kind of voice you use to tell a dog to heel and a stranger to stop breathing. Boots. My blood turned to sleet. I clawed forward faster. The tunnel narrowing, the earth squeezing. It widened suddenly. I slid, tumbled out onto my stomach, and slammed, breathless, into a fallen log under a lattice of bowed pines. The storm walled me with snow and air and the taste of iron. Behind me, the vent exhaled warm breath smoke, blood, human sweat, and an animal stink like old coins and wet stone. Somewhere above the trees, a light skated briefly across the snow. A stark, surgical rectangle, not lantern light. A tactical flashlight. Voices to now, clipped, professional. The consonants filed to sharp edges by years of command and compliance moved along the ridge toward the cabin. I couldn't make out the words. I could hear the smile. I pressed myself under the log and learned a new definition of stillness. They moved past my hiding place, one beam of light slicing so close to my cheek I could have counted my eyelashes in it. The first man paused, the beam ticking a slow metronome over brush, bark, blackness. He wore white camo that turned him into a snowdrift with a face. The rifle in his hands looked like it had never missed. The second man's light pivoted toward the cabin. The first followed. They descended, certain as gravity. I crawled the other way. The mountain took me down a gully, over a frozen slick that cracked under my weight and filled my boot with black water, through a stand of bent birches that clawed my coat with 1,000 thin hands. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe right. I didn't think. A shot cracked behind me. I ate snow. Another. The bark above my head exploded, showering me in splinters and the smell of green. I rolled behind a stump the size of a car. Silence swallowed the shots whole, like the forest was pleased. I waited. The world shrank to the shape of my mouth open against snow, dragging air in quiet. Snow gathered on my back, a blanket I didn't deserve. Somewhere uphill, metal screamed against wood. The cabin gave a long, low moan that ended in a sound you feel in your teeth. Then a single thunderclap, not weather. The final punctuation of a shotgun in a small room. I don't know how long I lay there. Long enough for the cold to become a theory instead of a warning. Long enough for the pain in my arm to resurface, tapping at my nerves like someone asking for change. I pushed up, staggered to a tree, and slid my back against it until my legs remembered they were legs. I shoved on, aiming for the channel in the dark where the trees thinned, for the idea of a road, for the possibility of a plow. My thoughts came in inventory lists: toes, fingers, heartbeat. Knife? No. Phone? Dead. Lantern? Gone. Jebediah. A sound chased me down the slope. Not a howl. Not boots. Not wind. Smaller. Meaner. The click of a safety on a rifle being flipped off. I dove right. The shot tore open the night where my head had been. I crashed into brush and tumbled through a shallow ravine, rolled hard, and slammed into something half buried in snow. A bumper. Rusted. Bent. Beside it, a hubcap the forest had been chewing for a decade. The ravine widened into a bowl. Moonlight leaked through the storm, just enough to show me a scatter of car parts sunk like bones in the snow, a door with 3 deep gouges ripped through the steel, a half-collapsed hood stamped with a dent the size of a man's chest, a fire-blackened engine block posed like an altar stone, trophies. Under a thin crust of white, the ground was furrowed with tracks that weren't animal and weren't human and weren't old. My panic learned a new language. I backed toward the tree line and felt heat at my calves. I whirled. A shadow peeled itself off the snow right behind me and rose, the way a man would rise from a chair. The lantern yellow eyes didn't blink. The muzzle split in a grin that showed to many teeth that had seen to many nights. Closer. Slow. Enjoying it. I lifted the only weapon I had left. A branch snapped from a birch that was more apology than threat. My hands shook. My arm burned like a fuse. My legs told me that running would be a joke and a snack. The creature cocked its head, the same gesture I use when code compiles on the first try and I don't trust it. It took one patient step, and another. A third light cut through the storm from the far rim of the bowl, and for a second the world turned surgical. Full beams, halogens, a diesel engine were above us. Wrong, impossible, mythic, and the trees exploded into white as my rentals twin a snowplow. No, a truck barreled off the road, off sanity, off the script of anything that makes sense, and came down the slope like judgment. The creature leapt, clearing me with insulting ease. I threw myself left. The truck smashed into the bowl hard, skidding sideways, fishtailing, chewing snow into a storm within the storm. The grill hit the monster square. A sound like a refrigerator full of meat thrown down a stairwell rolled over me. The truck's door flew open. A small figure climbed down, slow and sure. Thick jacket, scarf, white hair. She moved like a person who'd seen this exact moment coming for 30 years and had planned where to put her feet. The shotgun in her hands was old. The way she held it was not. LOD, I croaked, exactly as if the universe had decided to include callbacks in this horror. She didn't look at me. She looked at the monster thrashing under the truck's grill, a low, pained, angry sound soaring out of its throat. She stepped forward, eyes never leaving that ruin of fur and power, flipped the gun open, slid to Shell's home, snapped it shut with a click I felt in my molars. On your feet, she said, not to me. Across the bowl, another shape uncoiled from the trees, leaner, faster, unhurt. It paced along the rim, testing the air, gauging the distance. The eyes were the same. The hunger was not. Elodie pivoted without shifting her balance, the gun tracking the arc of the circle the female was drawing. "You broke the rules," she said, voice so calm it made the storm itself take a breath. "This is me collecting." The female roared. It sounded like thunder remembered how to hate. It bounded along the rim, then down the slope, straight at the woman with the shotgun. Elodie didn't aim for a headshot. She aimed low and long, then squeezed the trigger. What came out wasn't a tidy blast. It was a sheet of light, a gout of sparks and flame that slapped the night sideways. "Magnesium," my brain said, because brains are bad at knowing when trivia won't help. The creature hit the fire like a deer hits a fence too late, too fast. It howled. It twisted. It learned pain it hadn't earned yet. It staggered sideways and vanished into the slash of trees like a bad thought you can't grab. The bowl fell silent, but for the male's wet groan beneath the truck. Steam curled out from under the grill. The engine ticked itself toward quiet. Snow began to fall the way it does when a storm has told all its jokes. Elodie walked to the front of the truck and stood over what remained. There was no gloat in her, no victory, only the weariness that comes with collections. "They don't listen anymore," she said to the night, to me, to the metal under her hand. "So someone has to make them." She looked over at me then, finally, and her eyes were older than the woods. "Can you stand?" she asked. I tried. I could. Barely. "Good," she said. "Then you can help." She gestured with the barrel. I understood. I moved to the side, got my hands under the twisted front bumper, and leaned my weight into it while she rocked the wheel chocks loose with her boot. The truck eased back an inch, then two. The creature under it made a sound so small it didn't sound like it belonged to something that had tried to break my house in half. Elodie put the muzzle to its skull. Not a god in that gesture. Not a devil. Just a person doing the cruel arithmetic the mountain had stopped doing for itself. "Close your eyes," she said. I didn't. The shot cracked, and the forest did what forests do. It swallowed the noise, kept the secret, and let the snow get on with its job. Elodie cracked the gun open, ejected the shells, slid to more into the chambers with the casualness of breath. She turned to me, studied me in that clinical way strong people have when they're deciding if you can be saved. "You're coming with me," she said. "You'll freeze in 10 minutes and die in 20 if you don't." "What about?" I started, meaning Jebediah, meaning the cabin, meaning 100 things that all had the same taste. "Paid," she said. "Or not. Either way, you can't help him now." She climbed back into the truck like a queen onto a throne. I stumbled to the passenger side, dragged myself in, and slammed the door against the cold. We jolted up the slope, the plow chewing the hill into a ribbon of possibility. In the rear view, the bowl was already smoothing itself out, white erasing red, wind erasing tracks. In an hour, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. I watched until the tree line ate the last ugly geometry of the graveyard. When it was gone, I realized my hands were shaking so hard I'd driven crescents into my palms with my own nails. Elodie drove without speaking. The cab smelled like coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and a faint, bitter aroma I recognized now from the cabin. Tallow and herbs and the hint of ash. "What are they?" I asked finally, when my voice decided to work. "Old neighbors that forgot how to neighbor," she said. "Hunger with a memory, pride with teeth." She glanced at my arm. "And curiosity they shouldn't have." I swallowed. Am I the word snagged? "Changed," she considered. The wipers thunk slow arcs across the glass. "Not if I can help it," she said. "Not tonight." I bled into the gauze she'd wrapped me in. I bled into her front seat, into the mountain story, into the kind of truth you don't tell at dinner. She didn't scold. She didn't comfort. She drove like a person who knows exactly where she is in the dark and why. When the first dim line of dawn cut the black, the plow burst out onto a narrow county road. Civilization appeared in the shy way it does up here. A single power line stitching its way along the shoulder. A sign with half the letters shot out. The ghost of tracks from a truck that had passed hours ago. Elodie turned left without looking. After a mile, a low, lonesome building rose from the snow like a ship's hull. Her gas station. The one with the faded sign and the jars of strange bundles hanging behind the counter. She parked under the awning, killed the engine, and the sudden absence of noise rang. Inside, the station was warm as fur. She led me to the back room I hadn't noticed before, where shelves held glass jars of dried herbs and teeth and powders that looked like what you'd sweep from under a funeral pyre. A map on the wall was stabbed with pins and handwritten notes, circles and X's, and that same eye and claw symbol drawn in charcoal at the edges of the forest like a ward or a confession. Elodie put me in a chair. She cleaned the wound. I screamed. She apologized by not saying the word. She packed the tallow into the gouges. The pain blazed white, then dimmed to a sun behind clouds. "You're going to sleep," she said. "When you wake up, you'll tell me exactly what you saw, not what you think. What you saw. We'll set a mark on your door and a price." "A price," I said, woozy. "That's how rules work," she said. "When the mountain forgets them, people remember for it." I blinked at the map. The pins made a constellation I didn't want to recognize. "How many?" "Enough," she said. "Not as many as there used to be." The room swam. "Jebediah," I said. The name didn't weigh as much as it had. Elodie's face went unreadable. "Paid," she said again. "And a lesson nobody wanted to learn." "What lesson?" She met my eyes. "Monsters die," she said. "Debts don't." The world tilted, yawned, softened. I tried to fight sleep and lost. And as the dark rose up to take me, I thought I heard something like prayer braided through the wind that pressed against the station's windows. Not two gods, two rules, to the idea that even a mountain owes. When I woke, the clock above Elodie's counter read 4:03 p.m. Outside, the world was colorless snow, smoke, the sickly amber of a winter sunset caught in the pump lights. My arm had stopped throbbing. It hummed instead, a quiet vibration under the skin. The paste she'd packed into the wound had dried to cracked clay. Every time my heart beat, the lines of it pulsed faintly, almost like something beneath was listening. Elodie stood by the window, shotgun propped against the counter, watching the road. Her stillness had weight. "Sleep enough?" she asked. "Not really. You won't for a while." She poured black coffee into a mug, slid it across to me. "They'll come looking. Maybe tonight, maybe a week from now. They." Her gaze didn't move from the snow-blurred horizon. "The ones that still remember the hunt, but forgot the hunger's supposed to end. And the men who feed off cleaning up their mess." I frowned. "Hunters," she snorted. "Mercs, biologists, government. Take your pick. Everybody wants a piece of myth once they can weigh it." She pulled a folder from under the counter, grease-stained, edges chewed by time, and flipped it open. Inside are photos. Grainy, infrared stills of them prowling tree lines, a silhouette on a thermal camera, a blurred face half turned toward the lens. But some shots showed something worse. Men in snow camo loading carcasses into black trucks. Logos on the doors. DAGR Inc. Wildlife Containment Division. "I called in a favor after the last one," she said. "They arrived an hour before you did. Said they'd handle it. They don't handle. They harvest." The word hit me like cold water. Harvest what? Samples, blood, whatever doesn't rot before sunrise. She looked at my arm. "Sometimes the carrier." I wrapped my sleeve back down. "You're saying I'm saying don't let them test you." A low rumble grew outside. Diesel engines, more than one. Headlights broke through the snow as every armored trucks creeping up the slope. Orange strobes cutting the dusk. Elodie's hand found the light switch. The interior went back. "They're early," she whispered. "Stay behind the counter and keep your mouth shut unless I tell you otherwise." The lead truck stopped 20 feet from the door. Boots hit snow. A knock followed, polite, rehearsed. Elodie opened halfway. "Store's closed," she said. "Ma'am." The man's voice was smooth, official. "Agent Harland, Department of Wildlife Containment. We're following up on an incident last night. Large predator sighting." "I didn't see a thing," she said. He smiled. "Funny, because our drone feed shows muzzle flash from your coordinates." Elodie's silence was a blade. Harlan tipped his head toward the trucks. "We'd appreciate cooperation. It's safer for everyone if we confirm the site's clear. Meaning you want the bodies, she said. Meaning we'd like to prevent further contamination. That word again, contamination. I shifted behind the counter. The floor creaked. Harlan's eyes flicked past her shoulder. Fan the movement. There's someone else here, he said. Elodie stepped sideways, blocking more of the doorway. Customer. We'll need to speak with him. You won't. The pause that followed was long enough to measure a grave. Then Harlan sighed. Ma'am, step aside. He moved first. She moved faster. The shotgun thundered once. The door frame exploded in splinters. Harlan went down with a sound halfway between grunt and growl. The men behind him opened fire through the window short, precise bursts that chewed up shelves and glass and half a wall of jerky. Elodie dropped behind the counter beside me, feeding shells with the mechanical calm of a saint tired of praying. Back room, she ordered. We crawled through smoke and dust. I grabbed a fallen flashlight, flicked it on. The beam caught a trail of blood, not hers, leading out the rear door into the woods. They'll flank, she said. We cut through the wash, down to the creek. Snow swallowed sound, turned gunfire into distant pops. We ran bent low, slipping between half-buried trunks, adrenaline replacing sense. My arm burned cold now. The kind of pain that warns more than it hurts. A voice shouted behind us, amplified through a bullhorn. Stand down. Biohazard protocol in effect. Elodie laughed once, breathless. They love their big words. Something whined past my O-trank dart. Maybe. We dove into a gully. She pointed to a culvert half-choked with ice. Through there, we slid in, half-crawling, half-swimming through meltwater. Light flickered at the far end. When we emerged, the world had changed. The trees older, thicker, the smell of iron stronger. Elodie slowed. They'll stop at the old boundary, she said. GPS dies there. Why? Because they agreed to. Before I could ask who they were, a howl split the disclose, raw, furious. Not behind. Ahead. Elodie's face tightened. He's not dead. We broke into a clearing ringed with boulders blackened by fire. The snow here steamed faintly, as if the ground remembered heat. In the center lay the Malith Malihealth crushed, half alive. The truck's impact had twisted its spine, but its chest still rose. Elodie raised her gun. Wait, I said. I don't know why. Maybe because killing something helpless felt too human. The creature's eyes opened, yellow, focused. It looked past her, at me, and spoke. A single word, gurgled through blood and ruin. Brother. The forest leaned closer. My stomach dropped into a different dimension. Elodie didn't hesitate. One shot. Silence. She turned on me. Expression unreadable. That wound of yours, how deep? I don't know. She pulled off her glove, pressed her thumb hard against the skin, just below the bandage. I hissed. The flesh pulsed. Underneath, something moved. Small. Coiling. Then we cut it out, she said. I backed away. No. She grabbed my collar. Listen to me. It's not about saving you. It's about keeping the rules. You walk off this mountain with that in you. They'll have to hunt a whole new kind of monster. From the ridge, lights Farad Harlan's men, moving again. Voices, metallic through radios. Elodie looked up the slope. Then back to me. Your choice. Bleed now. Or let them use you later. She drew a knife, the same bone-handled pattern Jebediah had carried. My mind split into fragments. His scars, her warning, the word brother still echoing like a virus of meaning. I nodded. She set her jaw, pressed the edge against the wound, and the world collapsed into red. When I woke again, dawn was a rumor. The creek beside me ran black under ice. My arm was wrapped tight, blood seeping through a new bandage. Elodie was gone. No footprints in the snow. Only tire tracks leading down mountain that the wind was already erasing. In my palm lay the thing she'd cut out. A shard of bone, too smooth to be human, too small to be a tooth. I threw it into the current. It sank without ripple. From somewhere far off came the last howl of the season fading, lonely, almost human. I whispered to the empty woods, I'm not your brother. But the echo that came back didn't sound convinced. I made it off the mountain 3 days later. Or maybe it was one. Time loses meaning when you walk inside a storm. A plough driver found me slumped on the shoulder of Route 22. Frost in my beard, coat burned through in places. I must have looked like a ghost someone forgot to bury. When I woke again, the ceiling was white, humming with fluorescent light. Hospital. Civilization. The smell of antiseptic was the first proof I hadn't died. A nurse asked my name. I told her. She smiled like it mattered. Then she said the park rangers had found some kind of animal attack up near Timberline Ridge. 2 bodies burned beyond recognition. 1 dog-sized, 1 man-sized. They were testing the samples. I asked her to get rid of the bandage on my arm. She said, "Doctor will check that later." She didn't understand. I needed proof. When the doctor finally came, I watched his face as he peeled away the gauze. He tried to keep his expression neutral. Doctors are trained for that. But his pupils shrank. The gashes were close-sealed like wax poured into a mold. No stitches, no scarring, just smooth skin, paler than the rest, crossed by 4 faint white lines. "How long ago did this happen?" he asked. 3 days. He didn't answer for a full 5 seconds. Then he said quietly, "That's impossible." He ordered more tests. Blood work, tissue samples. I watched them label the vials with my name. They told me to rest. I didn't, because I could hear things. Every monitor beeped louder than it should. I could count the footsteps in the hallway, track heartbeats through walls, and the smell antiseptic and metal, and the faint tang of fear coming off every person who entered the room. That night, 2 men in suits came instead of nurses. No badges, just clipboards and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They asked me about unusual wildlife encounters, about individuals operating outside licensed hunting permits, about Jebediah Mills and Elodie Trent. I said nothing. They thanked me anyway. One of them reached for the tray with my blood samples. I saw the label, DAGR ink. The letters shone under the fluorescent light like teeth. When they left, I pulled out my 4, stole a jacket from the supply closet, and walked out through the service exit. No one stopped me. Maybe they wanted me to run. Maybe they knew where I was going anyway. The city felt wrong. Loud, bright, full of smells that made me dizzy exhaust. Food, people, all layered and living. I hadn't realized how many heartbeats a crowd carries until I could count every single one. I rented a room above a laundromat. Every night, I bolted the door and sat by the window with a thermos of coffee that tasted like metal. I tried to code again, to fall back into logic, to rebuild the walls that used to keep me sane. But the lines blurred, loops nested inside loops, until the programs I wrote started drawing shapes. For claw marks, an eye, a circle. The symbol from Jebediah's cabin kept reappearing, uninvited, as if the code remembered what I'd seen even when I didn't type it. I stopped sleeping. I stopped trying. Sharper, subtle, but there. I brushed until my gums bled. Then the dreams came, running through snow, trees rushing by at impossible speed, the taste of blood not as horror but as truth. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering a rhythm older than language. Once, I woke with dirt under my nails and no memory of leaving the room. I told myself it was trauma, survivor's guilt, a brain chasing patterns where none existed. But the scratches on the inside of the door said otherwise. I kept tabs on the news. A containment breach in the mountains. A chemical spill. 2 park rangers missing. No mention of Elodie. No mention of Jebediah. No mention of DAGR. But late one night, a video leaked a shaky clip shot from a dashboard camera. It showed the clearing, the truck, the creature pinned beneath it, and, for one frame, me standing beside it, drenched in blood, staring into the lens with eyes that glowed like animal glass. The caption read, "Unidentified subject still at large. Approach with caution." I closed the laptop. My reflection on the dark screen smiled back a fraction too slow. So now I record this, not as apology, as warning. You can say what you want: hallucination, infection, delusion. But if you ever drive up past Timberline Ridge, past the burned gas station, and you see the tree line split by an old road with no name, keep going. Don't stop. Don't look at the glass of the trees because they look back. And if you hear a voice that sounds like yours whisper your name, run. Because monsters are real, some are old, some are new, and some like me are still learning which side of the glass they belong on. Beat of silence, the moon's full tonight. I can feel it behind the clouds, tugging at something inside my ribs. If you're hearing this, lock your doors, and don't come looking for me.